Okay, we're on the seventh week of the East Meets West class, and we're going to start just with a picture of the spherot. And again, Reb Cordovero, who was a big Kabbalist, said that you destroy the world if you explain something spiritual with something physical. So we don't want to destroy the world. God did that once. Hopefully, he won't do it again. And this is, again, I've said this over and over again. The theory of spherot and worlds and all of the Kabbalistic definitions are theoretical concepts. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. Um, okay, so we look at this, and the first thing you see is color. And that's because the color, although color obviously doesn't exist like this, but it helps us understand certain things. So we'll get into that in a minute. So we're starting with Keter, which in Hebrew means crown, and the Keter is traditionally the top of the spherot, but it always empties into Malchut. And I'll just show you briefly this diagram here. You see that the Keter will empty into Malchut, will empty into Malchut, which then becomes Keter of the next world. And if you combine all these like a slinky, you would, taking this Keter of Atzilut and combining it with this Malchut of Asiyah, around, you would see that in the beginning is wedge the end, which is, I think, how Sefer Yetzirah starts. And then it's not really linear, but for learning practices, it's easier to see it linear. Now, we've learned about a person's ratzon or a will, as the deepest experience that a person can have of being. And the will is inside this, this top sphere. And the power of will that we have is supposedly the greatest power that a human being can have. And what is this vessel? What is the will to receive something? It's our vessel of thought. Okay, so this is, a human being stands upright and thought happens here in the brain. And the will for us to receive is this thought. It's who we are. And when Hashem wants to use us as vessels, he looks for vessels, basically. He looks for vessels that are not full, that he can use as containers. And so, Hasidus tells us we're never really alone. We're actually in the infinite mind of God. And our will is in this idea of Keter. And, basically, Jewish women are supposedly searchlights in a sense for truth and clarity. And we have this supposed ability. God gave us extra bina and extra chokhmah to receive this light. Now, what's the purpose of our intellect, right? We have intellect. It's to affect the emotions. So we see our intellect as Keter, Chokhmah, and Bina. Okay, these are traditionally known as intellect. And Bina, if you count the sphere going up or down, so you can start with Malchut, Bina is the eighth sphere, and then you have Chachma and Keter. And it's understood that the divine flow comes through Keter to Chachma and then to Bina. So what does Bina then do? Bina affects the lower seven spherot, Chesed, Gevur, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, and Malchut. And these are known as Za'ir Anpin, or the emotional spherot. And then you have the Partsuvim, where you have Ima and Abba, and then the daughter and the son. So the son is known, the Ben is why it's called Zeir Anpin, is known as Hesed, Gevor, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, and the Malchut is known as the feminine, the daughter. So in the Partsufim, you have Abba, Ima, son, daughter, but the Tachlis is that Bina, which comes from Chokhmah, right, its purpose is to affect the rest of the emotions as our intellect affects emotions. Very similar to like a tree whose, the greatest benefit a tree has is its fruit. So when you come from the intellect, what is the greatest benefit of the intellect? What the emotions do to the thought is they lift them higher than thought could be without them. And we show this in the anatomy when the heart in our blood goes up and down. We have these, we learned about this in when we studied the book, the Pri Yitzhak, that our blood vessels, there's a ratzov v'shuv, a constant return. The blood comes in and goes up and goes down and goes up from the heart to the brain, from the heart to the brain, and through the circulatory system to the other organs. So what they do for the emotions is they give the emotions a more authentic, deeper experience, validating it. Very similar to what the body does for the soul, right? Why do we need the body? We need the body to do mitzvot. So the soul gets elevated through the mitzvot that we use our physical body to do. Now, this inner bina, there's a lot in Kabbalistic mystical literature about Bina, but Bina is kind of like the unheard voice. It hasn't yet materialized. Chachma, we know, is that, that insight, that amorphic area. And then Bina begins to analyze those things. And it's drawn down from the brain to the heart, right? And then it penetrates these 7 lower sphirot, and it kind of gives them a new soul. What does that mean, a new soul? So, when Mashiach arrives, first of all, it's the number 8, Bina, 8, is above 7, right? We some of we know, that in Gematria, 7 is related to nature, right? God made the world in 7, 6 days, and the 7th day was Shabbos, but 8 is traditionally above nature. And when Mashiach comes, we also understand that things will be new and different. There'll be a spiritual reality where we see spirit in the physical world. So what does that mean? That people are beginning to do it now. When you look at a tree, or what do people go when they want to attach more to spiritual frequencies? They go to the ocean, or they go to to nature. They go to places where they can see this spirituality in physical reality. So when Mashiach comes, we will actually see these things with our physical eyes. We're seeing, or we're feeling spiritual frequencies now, but we're not actually seeing them. So even though we know that, in our minds, these things, we know that there's a spiritual reality, that, we don't see x-rays with our physical eyes, unless we're looking at a computer. That, we don't see a lot of things that we know for sure exist. We can't see our own heart, but we know it exists. And so when we see it, there's a pasuk that says Chomer ba miharuach. So Chomer is something material or physical. So we know that when Mashiach comes, the world's not going to change, but the physicality of the world, we will see, the spirit through the Homer. We will begin to see greater truth and greater clarity. And that's traditionally the role of the Jewish woman. And it's also the aspect of the land of Israel, right? When it says the divine presence is always in the land of Israel, and it's a land that's metaphorically directed by wonders and by divine care. So, and it's also a metaphor for Malchut and for the earth, Israel, and for the Jewish people. Okay, so let's just go on a little bit. So this was, I think we might have done a little bit of this last week about what's coming up for you. Now, again, I'm going back to the Japanese, to macrobiotics, just to validate the fact that George Osawa agreed that, that God exists, that Genesis is not a myth, it's an actual reality, um, you know, and that every minute, every second, God is recreating the world. And that he is the one, the only one in control. And um, I've been learning a little bit the book Sha'ar HaBitachon with the Hasidic commentaries, and this basically comes from there, saying that he is really the only one that we can trust because he knows what is best for us. Um, I spoke to a posek, a very well-known rabbi in Israel who's retired now, asking him the other day about what women are obligated to daven. And there are so many, I said to him, there are so many different commentaries from all the way from they really don't have to daven because it's time bound to we have to do all of Shacharit, all of Shemona Esrei, all of Mincha, all of the evening prayer. And he said, welcome to the world of Torah. This is the world of Torah. The world of Torah is a world of controversy. And so I said, well, how do you know then? If you want to be a religious Jew and you want to know what to do with your life, how do you know? And basically what he said was, which is what came up from Sha'ar HaBitachon, is that we really don't know. God knows better than we do. So when we have this, we say this in Shachar, we acknowledge the truth with God, with our kavana, with our relationship with him. And when we acknowledge the truth and leave things up to him, obviously putting in the effort with our obligations, more than lip service. In other words, we have to feel and experience each individual person at their own level. So because he's ultimately and intimately aware of everything that goes on with us, if we want not to have anxiety and worry, we need to cast our burdens on him. Why? Because he's the only one that really knew us, right? When we were in our mother's womb, right? No other person could know us there. And we haven't even been born yet. So when anything happens, it's by God's will. Reality is God's will. And I was on some summit today about living a joyful life, and someone quoted, I can't remember who he quoted, but he said, defining joy, he said, joy is what's happening in the moment without, I just want to say it exactly, it's what's happening in the moment without us. Hold on, I'm sorry. I just got to find it. It's just one last word, and I don't want to. Okay, joy is whatever is happening in the moment minus your opinion of it, right? So when anything happens, it's by God's will in the moment. And you can't increase anything or decrease anything or make it happen or speed it up. It's all predetermined in a sense. So whatever is decreed by God, we need to trust that and understand in public and private that God knows what's happening. And we have to train ourselves to know that and see it. And everything, right? The word emunah, which is faith, but it's also the root of it is to train. It's, uman. And the Tanya talks about this at length, to align our mind and, our thought and speech and action with this trust. And it's a lifetime job, but it's really extremely helpful. So now going back to week 1, we talked about Chesed Gevurah, Yin and Yang, and the opposites. And even though these Chesed and Gevurah seem finite because it's Chesed and Gevurah, we're defining it, so it's finite. But the light that's in them is infinite, right? Because it's radiated from God, and God is infinite. So when Abraham Avinu says, "I'm but dust and ashes," what does that mean? He dust and ashes are seemingly finite. right? But the truth is that these are the things that are in his body in the corporeal physical world, but his soul, what's keeping his body alive, is infinite. Um, okay, so we talked about this a little bit. So, and again, his body was formerly earth. What is earth? It's made out of fire, air, water, all of the elements. So even though his love came from this world of Atzilut, right? Atzilut is this world of emanation, closest to Kodesh Baruch Hu, and that's what radiated in his soul, and that's how he became a chariot for Hashem. I was learning today a little bit on the Parsha Lech Lecha. So Avraham. I don't know if you've heard from Nechama Leibowitz, but she brought a commentary about Avraham, saying that Avraham really created a second world, in essence, when he became this chariot to God's will and brought God into the world. We're not saying God didn't exist before then, but the world was destroyed and nobody really knew about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when he let the world know, it was like creating, in essence, a second world. And Abraham also, he was this chariot, and the will of Hashem was invested in his body. And it came down, obviously, through many contractions, as you can see here, because he wasn't in the world of Atzilut. It came through Bria, Yetzirah. He was in the world of Asiya, right? And so are we. And we can attain the same degree of godliness, which is why in Eov it says, "From my flesh I see God," right? Our flesh is down here in Asiya. And we can experience this. So, as long as we're in the physical bodies, we have this option depending on the choices that we make. And it also includes our emotions, right? And all of the things that are in our body. So I was going to do some breakout rooms if we had more people, which we can do. But I wanted to go on. Let me just pull up the other the next. Okay, let me know if you're seeing it now. Are you seeing that week 8?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So we're not going to do the review yet. What I wanted to do is just go into these questions a little bit. And we can do the breakout rooms at the end, but let's just look at some of these and try and be honest with answers. If during those last few weeks we've, what we've learned or what we've done with our eating and practices, has it helped in our lives to have more positive experiences? Do we have better clarity in thinking? Have you been more generous in your interactions? Do you feel like you have a little more control over what's happening? And, you know, can you accept the fact that God doesn't really give us more than we can handle? Do we have greater honesty, better appetite? Um, are we trying to eat simple food with joy and gratitude? Is our sleep any better? Are we still having bad dreams? So these are this is the goal. And sometimes you can be macrobiotic for 20 years and still not have these things. Um, this ability to fall asleep within minutes of lying down. That's, today I don't, that's kind of difficult. But, is our memory better? Do we have some relief from sickness? So these are just things that are kind of like goals in a sense of being healthy. Does anybody want to share any input about any of these things? Okay, I
I
can.
feel I
Yeah.
I feel more positive. Yes, this has helped me a lot, and also you're helping to guide me into taking our art classes has also in combination helped. Um, but I do have bad dreams and I don't get to sleep too easily. Um, and it's hard to balance. There's on one side there's a lot of good stuff happening. On the other side, there's still a lot of stress and anxiety, and my cousin's sick and my cat is having issues. So it's a balancing act.
Are you eating like how long before you go to sleep are you eating?
I usually eat dinner at about 7 and go to sleep around midnight.
So you're not eating before you go to sleep. Um,
No.
so there's a part of the Kriyat Shema Alamita. It's the Shema in the evening, and it's a long prayer, but there's one parak that is excellent. Um, and even if you don't want to say the whole parak, you can just say it's about asking God that you should lie down in peace, and that you should not have bad dreams or hihurim, which are thoughts that are and I'm telling you, every night that I say that, even if I can't say the whole prayer, it seems to work. Um, Bad dreams are difficult. You wake up and like, whoa, what happened? So I would try that. God really wants us to ask him for things. Um, Yeah, and the things that you're expressing are concerning. You're going through a stressful time. So, all better to, try and eat, more grains, you'll have B vitamins there, which are anti-stress vitamins and, calming foods. Um,
Mm.
I
All
want
yeah,
to
right.
add
Thanks.
something if I can.
yeah.
Right now, there's a free 6-day sleep challenge on the tapping solution. I don't know if you know what the tapping solution is. It's an app, but it's also, I think you can just access it online. There's a tapping, they do a tapping every night before you go to sleep on a different aspect of releasing tension, and it's incredible. It's I can't say enough good things about it. It
Have you
totally.
tried it for sleep problems?
Oh yeah, I mean I've been doing this for years, but I also just recently just do the 6-day challenge.
Mhm.
And it's because it's a tapping. I don't know if you're familiar with tapping. It's a
Yeah.
very designated system that
Mhm.
releases and helps balance the body before.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
it's uh it's a really nice.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. What about pain and sickness? Is anybody experiencing any relief from that? It's important to express wins, gratitude, good things that have happened. So, for instance, um, more generosity in our interactions. I mean, that's a whole spectrum. But even if you think of something very, very small that's helpful, um,
I can add, I've been more cognizant of what I'm eating and trying to incorporate whole grains more into my diet. For example, tonight I made a lentil soup for dinner
nice,
and it was very tasty.
nice.
So just being more aware of what I'm eating and trying to eat more grains and less animal fat, animal protein.
Yes, that's great. Um, okay. All right, let's go on. So again, we're always using the Torah. We go back to the Torah because we're Jews. And grains have always been, it's interesting. I was reviewing Hilchot Deah, the Rambam, which is his halachot on keeping yourself healthy. And he said something very, very strong, which I don't completely agree with all due respect, at least not in these times. Maybe when he wrote it, it was true that we can't that you can't know or understand the ways of God when you're sick, when you're not well. So you know, in those so being healthy is obviously it's very important, and the idea of grains is was always the staple our diet. And in those halachot, he mentions how, things that we should eat, shouldn't eat, when to eat. He mentions that should never eat flour that has been debrand. I don't know if you use the word brand, but I'm thinking here in Israel, everybody lives on pita bread, and it's all, there's no fiber. It's absolutely delicious, but it's, excuse me, white flour. And he says some other things there, about not eating when you're not hungry, not drinking, when you're not thirsty, basic things. So, when we understand that, so I'm going to get a little bit now into this spirit world, right? The spiritual world is still governed by the laws of change and harmony, the same as this world here. This world is just, spiritual turned into physical, and it goes both ways. So everything continually moves in this spiralic pattern, and the infinite world, the next life is like a continuation. It's just a change. So, according to macrobiotics, this idea of balance is that our life is eternal, right? And this dream is endless. And even though we have desires and will that seems to be finite, right? This devekut with Hashem that we're constantly yearning for and seems to be part of the whole reason why God created us is imperishable. In other words, that doesn't stop. And even though, everything is, like Shlomo Melech says, chavel, and not, kind of in vain, we still push to play in this universe, to do things that come up, and transforming ourselves constantly. And what's keeping our life force is our blood, and what's keeping our blood is what we put in our mouth. In addition to, obviously, God's will and our intention. Our intention is very, very important. So, and our environment is very, very important in order to continue this, realization. So this is interesting. This is basically macrobiotic, but it's also very much in line with Torah. Our body nourishes our soul in many ways, right? And I have seen this when I cooked macrobiotically for people who were dying of cancer. I saw more than once the difference between a person who ate chaotically and passed over, and particularly I'm thinking of one woman that I cooked for months, and her passage was much was less painful. So when you're living in that way in alignment with nature, like our ancestors, they knew when they were going to die. They got all their affairs in order, things were done. It's a sense that you feel. And so, if we continue along this journey and try and eat macrobiotically, eventually, according to George Osawa, when we're in our last stages of life, we become more like, I don't know, he says a sage or a saint, but it's you have a sense of being in a holier place, closer to God and the natural world. Now, some people naturally rise to higher levels in the next world. What does this mean? So this is kind of out there, but I've experienced it. And the words that I've used here, you have to kind of, what? Anyway, you have to take them with a little bit of grain of salt and ask me questions, and I can explain them. So after a lifetime in this, so this world, first we're in the world of water, right? We're inside our mother's womb and we're living in water. We get nourished by the placenta, and you can see us, right? We have a body, and the body is in the womb. The womb is the boundary of the environment. Then we get born, we come out into the world of air, right? We're nourished by either by our mother's milk or by food. And the identity is now we have a sense of consciousness. You look at a baby, he'll look at you. You snap your finger by his ears, he'll respond. So there's a sense of consciousness, and now we're living on the earth. So when we go beyond the earth's vibrational sphere, this is called the solar system. So the world is known as a world of vibration, right? We know what electromagnetic energy is. We know what frequencies are, and we know how, scientifically how things work, now that we've gone to the moon and other vibrational bodies. So this is the scope of it is the whole solar system, and we've learned about that. And the identity is this vibrational body and consciousness. So then it goes on. So our body changes into waves and particles, right? More waves. And when we're born into that world, the spiritual field and our body on this level is called a spiritual body, right? We've learned about celestial beings, right? And even though it's more like an image than an actual body as we know it, it's really just waves and vibration, but there is still a consciousness of the soul. I don't know if anybody's read my book, but this is the experience that I had. I wrote about it in the beginning when I was doing all these things. This is the experience that I had, and I think I had it so I can share it with other people. So the lowest sphere, right, again, is the solar spiritual realm, and it's surrounded by waves and rays. And it's both the Japanese or the Eastern and the Western both concern themselves with the same things. They're basically the same. It's just a different aspect of the same reality. So then he goes on and says the next level of life encompasses the whole Milky Way galaxy and all of its vibrational world, which is larger than the previous three dimensions. And then the body dissolves more, goes into a galactic world. And again, we experience the physical as rays and waves. And so we travel at tremendous speed. This is something that I experienced. This travel at tremendous speed, and then this is typically what the Torah would talk about is reincarnation. If our quality is not developed for life in this world, then we're reborn again into a solar vibrational world, and from there down through the solar system to this world. And reincarnation continues as we move back and forth. All I can do is say what I experienced, and I don't, and you can read about things that other people have experienced, but we have to know that this idea of transmutation is part of scientific research. It's clear that wherever there's life, there's death. Wherever there's death, there's transformation, and we can kind of create our lives by what we take in, not just obviously with food, but with other things. So this is just, man is not sustained by food. So this is just a picture of a group of women learning in my backyard in America. And then I'm just going to go through, haven't gotten my website up yet, but I'm going to go through some of the courses that I've taught in the past that I'm looking to teach in the future, if any of you are interested. So one of them was, I don't know, Leslie was here, but Leslie, are you still here? Oh, I guess she left. Anyway, I think she might have been in this class. So this Shara Yechud is the Mittler Rebbe's classic work, explaining how the unity of God underlies everything. And it's very good to, explaining the sphere of the world and, basically mysticism in a very down-to-earth way. The Shara Kedusha is an excellent book which works on midot and character traits and how through self-refinement we become holier, and how there's a way to train ourselves in that and really purify character traits. And then the Chavot LaLevavot I've never taught, but I've been reading it, and this is the next course that I really want to do. And it's basically explains how we trust God, why we trust God, when we have to trust God, and really how to do it. And how this really relieves us from anxiety, and it's a constant thing. In other words, it's making God more and more part of your life, and giving over that trust to Him. And the more that we do that, the more God connects to us. In other words, it's a reciprocal thing, like giving your will over to God, and then He gives His will over to you. And then I was, going to do a little more of East Meets West. And then if anybody, is interested in going back or reading the book that I wrote, The Healing with the Mitzvot is very specific about the parts of the body and how each part corresponds to the different mitzvot. And those parts are the purpose is to align ourselves with God, with this devekut, by way of creating wholeness in the body through the actual mitzvot. So we actually go through the mitzvot, the 613 mitzvot, and where they respond to in the body. And then the last one is Galut LeGeula, based on the Chabad teachings, and then it just explores most of the Lubavitch texts historically and personally in our lives, how we go from one to the other. So that's pretty much it. I just put a picture here. All healing is bound up with one's inner sense of being, one's personal intuition of uniqueness and potential, and a longing to be whole again with the source of one's origin. So I just wanted to bring one more thing in. Let me just I'll pull up the seventh one again, sorry. Okay, so I'll do this picture a little bit. So the point here is that using this system, we have choice. We have a choice. You can get up in the morning and you can choose to say Modeh Ani, thank God for giving your soul back immediately, or you can just go into despair that you're here again. There's a wide range in between, but the point is we have the choice, and we can control anxiety or panic. We can prevent it and we can control it. I'm a living example of that. So what's the proof of it? That we have the capability of doing that is the Torah prohibits it. It's actually a transgression. It's a negative transgression to worry, to have panic and fear. And the commandment specifically has to do with war, right? The Kohen Gadol would stand before the army and say, look, hear, O Israel, you're about to go into battle and you're going with your enemy, but don't let your hearts be frail. So we go into battle every day with a Yetzer Hara, and we're commanded, don't let your heart be frail, right? My daughter, God bless her, she constantly tells me, Ma, you have to be resilient. You're in Israel, resilient, you're resilient, And that's what the Kohen Gadol was saying. and it's counted as one of the mitzvot by the Rambam. And because the Torah can only command something that's possible for us to do, this is our free will, and it's exercised in our thought and our speech and what we do. And we choose what we think. We actually do choose it. Thoughts come in all the time, but we don't have to accept them. So even if we're terrified, in our own hearts, you can remove it. We can still remove the thought and the response, a reaction to it, from the fear. This is spoken about in detail in chapter 14 of the Tanya. And they say that you should do the opposite. In other words, don't allow your heart to weaken. So how does this work? How does it work? So all emotional responses, as we see in this chart, they come from the intellect. Keter, Chochma, Bina, and Dad here fall into the lower emotions. Hesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Yisod. Those are emotions. Okay, all of the emotional responses are sustained by Dat. Dat is the union, right? It's the union. So when we have awareness in our mind, the Zohar says, the Zohar calls our Dat the key to the six doors of our heart, which we learned about in the book. That's the beginning. There are 6 doors in the heart. Anyway, so that's what the Zohar is calling this awareness of the mind. Again, it's related to the ratzon, the will, and our ability to think and choose. So this ability can activate or deactivate all of these emotions. God has given us this power. It's difficult to train ourselves to use it. It's very difficult, but that's what we're given. So what does Dat do? It engages these emotions. It engages all these emotions through active mental activation and articulation. So when I think something, there are all kinds of mind therapies now based on this. But so when you stop the troubling thoughts, right, in your mind, then the mind disengages from the emotions. And in the Talmud, in Brachot, it says this, that it's up to a person to fear or not to fear. So, and he gives some techniques. He says 3 things. 1, keep engaged in other matters. In other words, you wake up and all of a sudden you feel like you're panicky or fearful. Move your body, do something else, keep your mind active. 2, have a schedule every day. Work at a fixed schedule. This rabbi I spoke with the other day said that a religious Jew, a pious person, really doesn't need more than 2.5 hours to daven, to read Tehillim, to have a connection with Hashem. There are a lot of other hours in the day, so we have to keep a fixed schedule. And don't speak of depressing things. Here in Israel, you turn on the news and it's 24/7. The war didn't end, Hamas is doing this, but Bibi is doing that, and everywhere. Why listen to that? It's not our business. It's not our business. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a Baal Milchamot, not us. And the Tzemach Tzedek wrote a beautiful mamar saying that you fight your illness, whatever your illness is, by fighting your fears. And the Rambam also in the Hilchot Deot on health, he says, in order to train yourself, we do it once, we repeat, you do it again. This is psychology 101, behavioral. What they say, it takes 3 weeks to train a behavior. So continuously until it takes no effort, right? So these things are possible. The Torah has given us the means to do it, and when we see the environment and the boundaries of the Sefirot, and what our Chachamim, the Arizal, and all the Ben Ish Chai and Shimon Bar Yochai, and before him, they've given us this map of our body, and all we have to do is use it. All we have to do is use it. But I think that it's, essential that we have support. So let me just check the chat. Yes, Heshvan is the 8th month. Thank you, Jenny. It's connected to Mashiach. And okay, I guess she had to leave. So I just want to open it up to discussion. Anybody have anything personal or something they want to share that we can help work out for anyone? Okay. So I imagine anybody who was going to come on would have already come on at 7, right, Laura? Okay, so next week, okay, so we didn't do this. All right, so let's just share gratitude. Can everybody just say 3 things that they have gratitude for that happened today? So I can start. I finally connected to my husband after 5 days of angst. So that was a good thing. And another good thing was I was able to study without any confusion, without any interruption. And another good thing is I didn't have any flashbacks, Baruch Hashem, from any of the fears that came after the heart surgeries I had. I'm going to stop the recording so people can share with confidentiality.